ballroom was so bright, it almost hurt to look directly at the chandeliers. Crystal teardrops shimmered above linen-covered tables and gold-rimmed china. Waiters in white gloves moved like dancers, silent and precise. I stood by the entrance, longer than I should have, smoothing the wrinkles out of my second-hand navy blue dress and wiping my palms against the seams. A woman in pearls glanced at my shoes. I caught the look, but said nothing. I'd learned a long time ago that silence protects more than it ever concedes. My eyes scanned the room until they landed on him, Darian, my boy, my only. He looked so polished in his tuxedo, laughing beside his bride and her parents. His smile had changed. It was tighter, more measured, but it was still his. My chest swelled as I watched him. I used to wonder if he'd ever forgive me for not giving him more. There were winters when the heating failed, and I'd bundle him in 3 layers and tell him it was a game. I worked graveyard shifts at the diner, came home, napped on the couch, and woke up to pack his lunch before school. His dad disappeared when Darian was still in diapers. No calls, no money. I never told Darian how close I came to losing our apartment. I just kept working, kept believing. A server gestured toward the family table near the front. I walked past rows of fresh orchids and glasses filled with something pink and sparkling. I was almost at the table when I saw it. A card positioned neatly beneath the ornate gold lettering that read, Mother of the Groom. My name, Corinne Maddox. And below it, in a loopy cursive, written with what looked like gold ink, low-educated fake mom. At first, I didn't react. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone thought it was funny. But then I heard the laughter snorts from the bride's side of the table. Her father leaned back in his chair, clearly proud of himself. Her mother covered her mouth and whispered something to her sister. A cousin chuckled, looking directly at me. And then Darian. He looked over. His eyes met mine. He saw it. I know he did. And he smiled. Not kindly, not warmly. Just a flicker of a smirk, then back to his champagne. My knees felt like they no longer belonged to me. I turned the card face down. Tried to sit. But the heat behind my eyes made it impossible. My chair scraped against the floor as I pushed it back. I stood, straightened my dress, and turned to leave. I made it halfway to the exit before the noise of the room dulled behind me. The air outside the ballroom was cooler, thinner, more honest somehow. I could hear the muffled clinking of glasses and distant laughter, as if nothing I had just felt even registered inside those golden walls. Then I heard my name, Mom. I froze. Not because it sounded tender, but because it didn't. It was clipped, almost bored. I turned slowly. Darian stood a few steps behind me, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a champagne flute like it had grown there. His bow tie was slightly crooked now, like the night was starting to unravel. He glanced around to make sure no one was watching too closely, then stepped closer. You should be grateful you're even invited, he said. I stared at him. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't ashamed. They were tired, detached. The way people look when they've already chosen a side and are just waiting for you to accept it. My mouth opened, then closed. There was nothing to say that wouldn't crumble me right there in front of him. So I nodded. Just once, a quiet surrender, not because he was right, but because the weight in my throat was getting harder to carry by the second. I turned and walked out. No one followed. No one called after me. The grand doors shut behind me with a sound that didn't quite echo, but still managed to leave something hollow in my chest. The walk to the parking lot felt longer than it was. I didn't cry. I wouldn't. I'd cried behind locked doors for years, but never in front of him. Not even when he came home at 17 and said he wished he'd been born into a different family. The bus was late, of course. I stood under the flickering street lamp, holding my coat closed with one hand and pressing the other flat against my chest. I told myself it was just indigestion. At home, the silence was thick and familiar. I kicked off my shoes, hung my coat, and sat on the same couch I used to rock him to sleep on. The room hadn't changed much. A photo of us on his 5th birthday still sat crooked on the shelf, his frosting smeared cheeks. My tired eyes trying to look awake for the camera. I didn't bother changing. Just sat there staring at the dark window, watching my reflection shift with every passing headlight. At some point, my phone buzzed. Then again, and again. I picked it up. 24 missed calls. All from Darian. The last one had come just 5 minutes ago. By the time I heard the knock, the sun had already stretched its way into the kitchen, casting soft light across the worn tile floor. I hadn't slept. I didn't even make coffee. I just sat at the small table, hands folded, phone on silent. Another knock. Firmer this time. I opened the door to find Darian standing there, his dress shirt, wrinkled collar open, hair slightly mussed. He looked less like a groom and more like a man who hadn't made it all the way home. "I didn't think you'd answer," he said. "I almost didn't," I replied, stepping aside. He came in slowly, like the space was unfamiliar. He hadn't been inside my apartment in over a year, even though he only lived 20 minutes away. He didn't sit, just hovered by the table, eyes darting around like he was looking for something that had once been his. I pulled out a chair and sat. "Why are you here, Darian?" He took a breath, then pulled his phone from his pocket and placed it on the table between us. "I saw the name card before you did." I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just waited. I was behind one of the pillars when they set it down. I saw Amara's cousin write it. Her father handed him the pen. He tapped his phone and slid it toward me. A video played, blurry at first, then sharpened into clear laughter. Amara's father leaning in, whispering something. Her mother sipping champagne, smirking. And then Amara herself nodding as someone scribbled across the nameplate. She said, "That plumber woman, she's just a placeholder." His voice cracked at the end. I watched it all without blinking, then looked up. "You let them do it." "I had to," he said, sitting down finally. "I needed to know. I needed to see if they would actually humiliate you in public, not just hint at it, not just slip comments into conversation. I needed to know what they were capable of when they thought I wasn't watching. And now you know," I said, keeping my voice even. He looked at me, eyes red-rimmed, no longer detached. "I thought marrying Amara was just a formality. We'd already built a future or so, I thought. But when they touched, you mocked you. I saw exactly what they thought of me, too." He paused. "I'm sorry I didn't stop it. But I wasn't just watching for them. I was watching you, too." "Me?" I asked. "To see if you'd stand up, if you'd walk away. And you did, without a word. You reminded me who raised me." I reached for the phone, my fingers brushing the edge of the table. "What now?" I asked. He looked at me, something cold and precise settling in his gaze. "Now," he said, "they see who they really invited into their family." Darian insisted I come to his apartment. It was the first time I'd stepped foot inside. Sleek, quiet, and curated like him. Minimalist furniture, everything in shades of gray and black. No photos, no clutter, no signs of childhood or warmth. Only the faint smell of coffee and something expensive I couldn't name. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder thick with documents, then set it on the counter in front of me. "I never signed the prenup." I looked up. "What do you mean?" "They pushed it hard," he said. "Her father sent over lawyers. Her mother cried in front of me. Amara told me it was just a formality, but I didn't sign. Not one page." I ran a hand across the folder's edge. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because they thought they were marrying into a man who had nothing," he said. "A man who owed them status? They looked at me the way they looked at you, like we were placeholders. Temporary. Disposable." He walked to his desk and opened his laptop. A blue logo appeared on the screen, some kind of tech company I didn't recognize. For the past 4 years, I've been building a cybersecurity firm with a college friend. We kept it quiet, low profile, no flashy investors, just solid code and contracts. He clicked through folders like muscle memory. We were acquired last fall. Full buyout. I walked away with more than enough to cover 100 weddings. I kept living modestly so no one would notice, especially them. I sat down, trying to process the gulf between what I thought I knew and what he had become. But that's not all he said. Westcott Hospitality is failing, quietly. They've been propping themselves up with bad loans and investor bluffing. He opened a spreadsheet, and my eyes followed the lines of figures I couldn't understand. For the last 11 months, I've been buying silent shares through shell companies, trusts, layers they couldn't trace. As of this week, I own 48%. I stared at him. They think they married a name, a resume, a future tied to their brand. What they don't know, he said, voice flat, is that I've been building their ending. Quietly, piece by piece. He closed the laptop and looked at me with calm certainty. Tomorrow morning, I finish it. The building was all glass and steel cold, even in the morning sun. Darian held the door open for me, and we stepped into a lobby so polished I could see the trembling in my hands reflected in the floor. Receptionists whispered. Phones were half lifted from cradles before calls were forgotten, mid-sentence. They recognized us. Not from business, but from the wedding. We took the elevator to the top floor without a word. Darian's shoulders were squared, his expression unreadable. Mine, I wasn't sure. Somewhere between numb and bracing. The boardroom was already full when we walked in. Sterling Westcott sat at the head of the table, a man too used to power to consider the possibility of displacement. Amara sat 2 seats away, her face pale under the makeup. Lydia Westcott stood near the window, pretending not to notice me. Darian didn't wait for introductions. I'm calling this meeting to announce a change in ownership, he said, placing a thick file on the table. As of this morning, I control 52% of Westcott Hospitality through silent partner acquisitions and legal transfers. Here is documentation for the board's review. Sterling barked out a dry laugh. This is a stunt. A bluff. We would have seen it coming. You didn't, Darian replied simply, because you never thought someone with my last name could outthink you. Murmurs rippled across the room. Board members reached for papers, flipping pages, scanning signatures. The silence that followed wasn't uncertain. It was dawning. Sterling's voice cracked. You conned your way into our company. Darian looked at him steadily. No. I built my way in. You were too busy underestimating me to notice. Lydia stepped forward. You can't do this. We are this company. He turned toward her. You were. Effective immediately. Sterling, Lydia, Amara, you're terminated. Your severance will be handled by legal. You hold no voting power, no executive title, no future ownership. Gasps filled the room. Amara opened her mouth but said nothing. Her hands gripped the edge of the table like it could stop her from slipping. Sterling lunged across the table, eyes wild. You bastard! Darian didn't move. No, he said quietly. I'm the son of the woman you mocked in front of 200 guests. The woman who worked herself raw while you laughed at her shoes. You humiliated the wrong woman. I'm just the consequence. He turned to me and nodded once. I followed him out as the room buzzed in disbelief behind us. The air in the hallway felt different, thinner, lighter. At the elevator, I looked at him. You didn't have to do this for me. He pressed the button. I didn't do it for you, he said. I did it because of you. And as the door slid shut behind us, I realized something had been restored. Not just my dignity, but his. It had been 2 quiet weeks. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace yet, but still I breathed easier. No headlines. No phone calls. Just the slow return to a life where I didn't feel invisible. Then came the knock. I opened the door to find her standing there. Amara. Her once perfect hair was slicked to her face, makeup running down her cheeks like ink bleeding through cheap paper. She clutched a soaked designer clutch like it was all she had left to hold. Her heels clicked against the tile as she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Please," she whispered. I didn't know where else to go." I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen and poured her a glass of water. She didn't touch it. "I made a mistake," she said, voice trembling. I was under pressure. "My parents? My mom?" She said Darian needed guidance, that he'd resent you if he ever got serious. They convinced me that cutting you down was just part of fitting in, but I didn't mean it. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I looked at her mascara streaked and eyes wide with panic. I remembered her wedding smile bright and polished, the same mouth that had curled so easily at the nameplate someone else wrote. But she let sit there. "You're not sorry for what you did," I said quietly. "You're sorry for how it turned out." Her face froze. Behind me, the door opened again. Darian stepped inside, dry from the car. Crisp shirt tucked, not a single trace of doubt in his eyes. "I thought I'd find you here," he said to her. "You always return to the people you step on when you run out of ground." She turned to him. "Darian, please. We were happy once. We can fix this." I panicked. He pulled a small envelope from his coat and handed it to her. "Your parents signed this when they were desperate to offload their remaining shares," he said. "There's a clause in it, ironclad, that permanently blocks any member of the Westcott family from owning, operating, or advising any business under my name. That includes you." She didn't take the envelope, just stood there staring at it like it was written in fire. "Please," she whispered. He looked at her one last time. "You had your moment to speak. You chose silence when they mocked my mother. You chose image over integrity. And now, I choose this." He walked past her without looking back. And I closed the door. Not hard, not angry, just closed softly. But finally, the auditorium was warm, filled with the rustle of paper programs and the quiet excitement of people who didn't often get dressed up. A banner stretched across the stage. The Maddox Grant. "For mothers who begin again." My name, our name, printed in bold letters. I sat in the front row wearing a navy dress Darian had given me last month. He didn't say anything when he handed me the box, just smiled and said, "It's your turn." The ceremony was simple. No orchestra, no chandeliers. Just a podium, folding chairs, and 32 women whose stories sounded so much like mine, it hurt in the best way. Some held babies in their laps. Some held back tears. Every one of them looked like they had been told no too many times and were finally hearing yes. Darian stood on stage, calm as ever. He wore the same gray suit he'd worn to that final board meeting, but today his tie was loosened, his voice warmer. "I spent years thinking success was something you wore on your wrist or signed in ink. But I was wrong," he said into the microphone. "Success is surviving what tried to break you. It's getting back up and showing up anyway." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Then the mayor stepped forward, a smile stretched wide across his face. "And what inspired you to start?" "The Maddox Grant, Mr. Maddox." Darian didn't hesitate. He turned, slightly lifted his hand and pointed to me. "That woman," he said. "The one they laughed at. The one they tried to shame for not having degrees or diamonds. She's why I exist. Every code I wrote, every deal I made, every time I was underestimated, I heard her voice in my head telling me to keep going." The room was silent for a beat, and then the applause came slow, then rising until it filled the entire space. I didn't cry, not right away. I just smiled and nodded, hands folded in my lap, letting the warmth wash over me without flinching. After the ceremony, some of the scholarship recipients came to shake my hand. One hugged me. Another asked if I'd mentor her once classes started. I said yes to all of it. I wasn't used to being seen like this, not pitied, not dismissed, but honored. Later, as the crowd began to thin, Darian found me by the back doors. He didn't say much. He just looked at me the way he used to when he was little, when he wasn't sure if he could do something but needed to know I believed he could. "I'm proud of you," I said. "I learned it from you," he replied. We stepped outside into the fading light. The sun was still warm enough to touch my skin, and for once I didn't feel like I was catching up to life. I felt like I was standing in the middle of it. The porch light buzzed softly above me as I unfolded the letter again. It had come in that morning, handwritten in neat, careful script. A young woman named Nia, mother of 2 starting night classes next month, thanks to the scholarship. She wrote about standing in the back of a classroom last week, too scared to sit down. About how seeing my name on the grant made her believe she was allowed to take up space. I read it twice, then a third time, then folded it slowly and slipped it into the book I kept beside my chair, the one with all the blank pages I still hadn't dared to write on. The framed nameplate sat just a few feet away, leaning against the wall above the trash can. I hadn't thrown it out. I thought about it once, but something stopped me. Maybe it was a reminder. Maybe it was proof. Low-educated fake mom. It didn't sting anymore, not like it used to. Now it felt more like a stone that had been in my shoe for years, small, sharp, and constant, until one day it wasn't there. Just the memory of walking with it. I took a sip of tea. The mug was warm in my hands. Inside, I could hear the faint melody of Darian playing the piano. A new habit. He said he didn't want to chase anything anymore. Not numbers, not status. Just sound. He was getting better. Not perfect, but honest. The stars above were scattered and soft. The kind of sky that doesn't ask for attention, just offers it quietly. I let myself lean back in the chair and breathe. Everything we had built through sacrifice, through silence, through the kind of love that doesn't always speak but never leaves, was still here. Still standing. Stronger. Darian struck a familiar chord inside the same one he played the night after the scholarship ceremony. I closed my eyes, letting the notes carry me not forward, but inward. Somewhere between the silence and the music, I felt it. Not victory. Not revenge. Just peace.